Today, I talked with Gil Broza. We talked about how languages shape our understanding in the world, how learning is easy with the right resources, and how computers are less forgiving than humans are. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello everyone, and hello Gil. Is it how I should pronounce it? Gil? How do you pronounce your
Gil,
name?
Gil.
Gil, that's what I thought it was. Um, in the beginning, I was asking it offline, and the more I did it, was like, no, I actually should ask it online because it's nice for people to also learn it a little bit that way. And when I say here with me, I want to show a little bit. So I'm in Belgium, and if I'm correct, you're in Toronto, and we're
hmm
moving thanks to Google showing us a little bit on where you are, and so that that kind of is a nice way to show. And when I
Sure.
say here on my side, it's a few minutes after 8 o'clock in the evening. What's the time on your side?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. So it
hmm
shows at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I suppose, not
Yes.
middle of the night. So that kind of shows a little bit how we are, how the recordings are these days. Time zone difference, and there's actually a few people from Toronto that I've been interviewing
hmm
lately. So it's one of these cities where there's multiple agilists, I would say.
We have a really big Agile community here, and
Yeah,
I think it's also one of the earliest ones.
I've been to Agile Toronto. What was it? Agile to Toronto? I don't remember anymore. But I've been to Toronto. Well, lots and lots of years ago. So yeah. But we jumped already a little bit into that. For the people that don't know you, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm independent. My thing is to help tech leaders really deliver terrific results, much better than they do right now, by upgrading their Agile way of working. So
Mm,
it's not often that I need to help clients kind of get into Agile for the first time, unless it's outside
mm,
of software, which I also do. But at least in tech, everybody has something going on. So my thing is to help them get far better results out of that, usually by really getting deep into the mindset of it, so making agile choices and not just following prescriptions and practices and checklists, and by really building up terrific leadership that enables and removes impediments and manages the system, and all the good traits we expect from agile leaders. And I also help their non-software colleagues. Um, what I found is that quite often uh, people in non-software functions, let's say marketing or finance or HR, they kind of copy paste from tech.
mm.
They use the same ideas, the same frameworks. They take Scrum or whatever, and that just doesn't work all that well. So I've really built up expertise in helping all of those teams and departments make Agile really work well for their unique context.
Yeah, I
Uh,
really
yeah.
like that. That's and the upgrade part I like as well, indeed, because by now, 2023, most people have or at least in IT, a lot of us have been doing Agile or some version of Agile. Let's put it like that, and
Yeah.
then an upgrade might be needed, indeed.
Yes. And for the so I've been in Agile about 23 years now. I mean, you and I first met not a lot after, I suppose.
Mm,
And um, in those years, I have never, really given people just a here's how you should do things. That's just not my thing.
mm,
I'm very much into helping people think for themselves, helping to understand the choices that they make, the consequences of their choices, uh, the system in which all of this takes place, primarily the human system. So um, I think you had a little part to play in like this being the original one, kind of how to lead teams. The next one, which is the choices that we make. And the one that I had the perfect timing to release just before COVID is how to work outside of software. And none of these are Scrum specific or Kanban specific or anything um, prescriptive.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah. There is a lot there, and it's interesting that you say because yeah, non-prescriptive thing because usually one of the things that I think both of us we get is that we have kind of a possible clients that say we want to do agile by the book, and my default answer is what book, and I point to all these books behind me because they're all saying something different.
Yes.
By design, I would say, because it's all based on our experiences in, let's say, a couple of companies. None of us have experience in 100 companies, or if we would have, then it's not a year experience in a company. So then it's very limited experience, and every company needs. Basically, I say they need their own kind of book. They need their own kind of way to define what works for them and what doesn't,
Right.
and what
Wh-
works this year won't work next year probably. So
Yeah. Which is why, like when I wrote this one, it was all about how do you actually approach the customizing of Agile to your specific situation.
mm,
And it might end up looking somewhat different from the manifesto, and that's okay. And maybe you decide not to even call it Agile, that's okay too, as long as you have a way of working that allows you to deliver better results. That's simple. Uh,
yeah,
mhm.
these days it's might be even better to not call it agile than calling it agile and then doing something that is much more waterfallish or command and control,
Yes, yes,
because it will confuse the heck out of people.
it definitely does. Yes.
And yeah, and so we're jumped already right into some of these topics. um let's go for that first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you but has influenced you in who you are?
So something I think most people don't know about me is that um, I am quite into languages, and from my 20s, I've already been able to understand 8 languages.
Wow.
And yes, and they're quite different. I did not grow up in Europe, where multiple languages are kind of normal, and I've found that this gives me a really good window into how other people understand things
Mm.
and how they think of the world, and also how to communicate in ways that really work for people.
Okay, could you give an example for that? I think I kind of understand it, but might be good if you can give some
Sure.
kind of a.
So, an example that comes up a lot when I teach courses, for instance, we get to the point of effective versus efficient. Okay.
Mm.
In English, two very different concepts. Effective is you do the right thing, you solve the right problem, and efficient is you do it with minimal waste. The language I grew up speaking, which is Hebrew, does not make the distinction. And since
Mm.
then, I have understood and realized actually that many languages don't make the distinction. I recently spoke with a client in Norway. They use the same word. I think in German it's the same word. Um, and what this also demonstrates is that we have other words that, other concepts that in English, just being the lingua franca, we have two separate terms, but in other languages we don't. Collaborate and cooperate. Okay,
Wow, that I
right?
didn't know.
hmm Uh, output and outcome, right? Which is a big deal in the agile space. Work to outcomes, not to outputs. Some languages don't make the distinction.
Wow, this is interesting. The effective and efficient, I knew, for example, in French,
Okay.
it's the same. There
hmm
is actually both words exist, but most people only use the word for efficient, sorry, and mean both concepts. So many people don't know it, and so for I think 5 or 10 years, I said, oh, there's only one word, and then I think a professor of French told me, yeah, actually there is another one, but nobody knows it. So which kind of gives the same results.
Yes, of course, of course. Um, the thing is, even many English speakers that I come across, they will use either word and really mean the same concept,
Mm.
but a lot more people do, in fact, know the distinction. So there's definitely that. Um,
But these
Yeah,
are really good examples of yeah,
yeah.
the fact that you have one word for or two words for some different concepts that in other languages don't exist.
Hmm.
It's the typical thing that many people know. Okay, if you're whatever, if you're, where was it, from people from whatever country, they have 7 or 8 words for snow, where for us it's just one. Yeah, because that's different kind of snow, which is important in these kind of cultures. But in our languages, most people don't even realize it. And I think indeed, understanding subtleties in different kind of words is really important in, well, let's face it, a lot what we do in Agile is about communication and trying to express what we want in
Yes.
better ways. And then if the words don't measure up, or if cannot be translated, that really is hard.
Hmm.
So
Well,
it's
sometimes this plays to our advantage. So I'm working on my fourth book now, and the title I've picked for it is Deliver Better Results. And I specifically picked the word results because it actually means somewhat different things to different people,
mm,
all of whom I want to read the book, and it will be relevant for them. But in some cases, results means the outcomes, solving user problems, and so on. In other cases, it's just quantity of work and throughput.
mm.
I think both both personas need what I have to share there, and both would use the word result.
And by the time they realize that you mean something else, so they're already hooked in the book. Some That's
I
kind
should
of
hope so.
my, but
Yes.
that's yeah, I like that. I like that. Indeed, that's a good way to get people to buy the book. But it's really good because indeed, there is a lot of, yeah, discussion sometimes. I totally didn't know about collaboration and so that there's different kind of concepts, so that doesn't exist in some languages. That's really important.
Uh,
um,
I'll actually add something to this. Um, so again, I grew up speaking Hebrew. In Hebrew, when we want to say effective, we actually say effectivi, right? We actually use the term from the other languages. But when it comes to distinctions such as collaborate and cooperate, we have nowhere to turn to. There are no alternatives. We can't even say the English word and expect people to get the right association.
mm,
So there is a problem there for sure.
yeah, and yeah, and this becomes even bigger problem, of course, the more, yeah, international we become, and the more, yeah, we collaborate together and work over multiple cultures. And then
Hmm.
and especially, well, for me, one of the things I've noticed is that when I work with a person that is not native English, we kind of, I think sometimes it's easier to understand each other because we both know that we don't understand all the subtleties. Where the English, they were all these kind of subtleties that I don't understand, and they assume because I kind of speak English that I understand all these things.
I
Um,
have seen that happen. Yes. Mm.
That's another thing. So yeah, I can definitely see how that influenced you. And just for the record, what are the languages that you speak? Because you said you
Okay.
speak 8 languages.
So I don't speak all of them because I haven't
Oh
had
yeah,
a
you
chance to
understand them.
practice enough, but I understand them. So it's Hebrew, English, of course, Arabic, French, Spanish, Italian, German, and Portuguese.
Wow, and these are indeed very different kind of
Hmm.
languages that sometimes have other origins and everything. So that's yeah, these are
Yeah.
that's yeah, very influential. And how did that came to happen? How does that did that work? Okay, Hebrew, that's your mother tongue. You
Yes.
English. I think a lot of us we learn English because we see that it's needed. But
School.
how did you learn all the other languages? Was it a school
Um,
or how does that
yeah.
work?
So Arabic was also in school, and
Hmm.
also, I translated some stories for like a final assignment. And uh, in my family, my grandparents spoke Yiddish, and I figured, I might as well learn German. It's close enough, and it seems to be, useful enough. So I learned that. Picked up French just after high school, just out of interest. At some point, my wife and I traveled to Italy, so we said, let's just learn the language. So we did, and
Wow.
yeah,
That's dedication to go for holidays and or to go for a country and say, okay, let's learn the language. That's dedication, I would say.
it is. So interesting. It's also similar to how we think of education in the agile context. If you find the best resource, learning is easy,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you can learn a language the hard way, which is what I've usually done, which is what are the rules? Because I'm a math geek, I'm a computer science geek. I like the rules. I like to think of grammar as something that you kind of generate. I learned this way. It doesn't help speaking, let me tell you. But if, but if um, but if you learn with some use cases in mind, it becomes a lot easier. And the book that really helped us learn Italian um, taught it not from the perspective of like Italian immersion, right? Here we'll throw you into the deep end, and you'll just have to figure things out. It came with translations for everything. So like I can read an Italian sentence, and then I can read the English sentence and say, oh, so that's how it works, and that's why they say it the way they do. And
Hmm.
now I can see the pattern. So that definitely helped. Um,
And did it
I,
help that you already knew other languages that you could
yeah,
easily
yes.
yeah, okay, I
Yeah,
can get
because I also learned Spanish in 10th grade and with a tutor. And then I visited Spain, and that kind of helped me to see the parallels. Um, but I'll tell you this, I love travel.
that.
And my favorite place to go is Europe. I've been to most of Europe, and any place we go, if I happen to either know the language or know something close enough, it totally upgrades my experience.
Mm.
So, for instance, when we went to Norway, Norwegian is not the same as Swedish or as German, and my German is not all that great. But it was enough for me to at least kind of understand when I walk around what's going on. Even though everybody there is fluent in English, I can ask questions in English and I'll get very good answers in English. But it helps me feel a little bit more local.
Mm. Yeah, and I think people kind of like that you do the effort. Where I think in the US, people kind of assume that you speak English and that's kind of normal. But in a lot of other countries, when you do the effort to speak the language, and probably they realize that they don't speak your language, then it kind of helps to understand a little bit better. And sometimes indeed to understand some of the local whatever culture if you yeah if they
Yeah,
can uh,
because language
they
is culture. It
mhm.
totally is. And so feeling like I can be a little bit more local, it's like with Portuguese. I never actually learned it, but because I know Spanish and French and Italian, when we went to Lisbon last year, I could read everything fluently.
Wow,
I,
that's
I
nice.
figured out how some things kind of map to each other, like how they do tenses and prepositions and things like that, and the rest was easy.
Yeah, and I assume that the more languages you know, the easier it is to see some I think I see something similar when you learn programming languages. Once that you know
Yes,
five or six, it's like, okay, I don't get all the
yes,
details, but I kind of understand and I can read the code and yeah, that yeah,
yeah.
it's kind
Only
of similar.
computers are less forgiving than humans. So if you make a mistake, if you
Exactly.
make a mistake programming, good luck finding it. But right, but if
Yeah,
it's speaking to
especially
someone, that's
because
a different story.
the messages that they give you is also very cryptic sometimes. Like there is an
Yes,
error, but yeah, where is it on what line? That's not always the right
yes.
thing. But yeah, at least you would know again that if you make a mistake, if I make a mistake saying something to a human, we might think we understand each other, and I might get, I don't know, something wrong for dinner or whatever. And again, that's probably not that bad. I will just be surprised. Okay, that's already a very wonderful answer, and that's definitely something that I can see had influenced you. So I want to move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you know anything that would have become of you? Do you have any idea?
I think the most likely answer is product manager.
Hmm.
So in the last, you know, 23 years of working in Agile, partly as a manager, mostly as, coach, trainer, consultant, and such, I've worked with plenty of product managers, and I find the field fascinating. And now, being self-employed and running my own business, and pretty much everything I produce, book, course, whatever, is a product. Um, I have a much deeper appreciation for the topic, and I find it very appealing.
Mm.
Wicked challenge, but very appealing. Yes,
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think you're a person that walks away from a challenge, or if am I
not
wrong?
usually. No. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you make the link indeed with being self-employed, because then indeed everything you do is a product. In a sense, yourself is a product as well. You mean you need to put yourself in the market, and you need to make sure
Yeah.
that people know about you and yeah, and see you. And yeah, that's also, well, the product is already there, but at the same time you still need to manage it. And maybe you see somewhere like, okay, maybe I can work a little bit on that or that skill to make
Yeah.
it even better. So that's definitely something I can see. And do you have any idea on, because that's a very nice answer, but do you also know what influenced the way you think about product, for example? Is there anything that was taught? Is there anything, I don't know, do you know where your interest might be coming from?
Okay. I think I know. I think I
Hmm.
know. So something else that people don't know about me, but that has informed a lot of what I'm like, is I've been hooked on puzzle solving since I was like really, really young.
Hmm.
So not jigsaw puzzles. Let's get that off the table. I mean, I do them, but that's not quite solving. Um, it's like word puzzles and math puzzles and logic puzzles.
Hmm.
And to this day, I always have a puzzle going on. There's right now, as we speak, there's a half solved one in the living room, and there's one near the bed, and so on. And I think product management is, in a way, a lot like solving puzzles because there are so many unknowns. There is a rhyme and reason. There is something that you don't know that does guide people's behavior. So, for instance, we make a product, we put it out in the market. Some people love it, some people hate it. There are reasons. Sometimes we
Hmm.
can't anticipate them, sometimes we can. Sometimes, even after we see the effect, we don't know what's going on, but there are explanations. Now,
And you like to look for that and try to solve that
yes,
puzzle. That's what I hear. Yeah.
yes, to look for the patterns, look for the relationships. There's a lot of system thinking going on here, but also like what's going on that explains what I'm seeing.
Hmm. I
Okay.
like that.
For instance, we are recording this in June 23, a very weird year for business. Okay.
Oh
Some
yeah.
businesses, right? Some businesses are super successful, some are not. It's in pockets here and there. I'm still trying to wrap my head around why are some things doing really well and some are not, and kind of trying to understand the dynamic. And again, I know there's lots of dynamics, many systems in question, lots of relationships, feedback loops, and whatnot, but um, really trying to understand this so I can, you know, bring to my clients what they need.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, that's definitely a tough puzzle this year. I can see that.
Yes.
We were all thinking, I think in January, like, okay, we got out of COVID more or less. It still is kind of around, but mostly we know how to deal with it. So okay,
Yeah.
we're going back to business as usual. And then there is some war going on, and there's energy crisis, and there's lots of other things that are happening.
Yeah.
And here we are 6 months later, and it's like, okay, that's not what I expected in January. That's
No, not at all.
definitely. And again, this is part of how I think we agilists look at the world, in the sense that we know that not everything is predictable, and we know that we need to adjust. We just don't know to what things we will need to adjust. um,
Yes.
okay, I want to, and we're kind of in moving into that direction, as about challenges. What do you consider your biggest challenge right now, and why is that a good thing then for you?
Okay. So biggest challenge right now or biggest challenge in general?
Well, bigger, you can choose, and of course choose the thing that you want to share, because sometimes people tell me like, yeah, there is another bigger challenge, but I don't want that to be out on the internet for forever. So it's really your choice what you want to do.
Okay. Okay. Uh, so another thing that characterizes me is a profile, let's call it, called a questioner. This is something I learned from Gretchen Rubin, who wrote a book called The Four Tendencies. And we all have tendencies when it comes to how we respond to expectations. And my profile out of the four is called questioner, which means that I don't take things for granted. I like to think for myself. So if somebody expects me to do something, it has to pass the filter of, does this make sense for me? Other other tendencies have to do with obliging and appeasing, and another one is what she calls an upholder, which is basically a person who kind of always draws within the lines and does what they're supposed to do. And being a questioner is a little bit of a challenge for business, let me tell you that, because the way a lot of the business world works, people have very specific expectations about how things should run. And for instance, they take a course on Agile, they have expectations of what will happen as a result. And some of those expectations might include a certificate or a certain curriculum or hearing the words of a certain guru. And I don't do any of that. So, if you take one of my courses, most of them are for leadership, you will learn to think for yourself and maybe think differently. And this is not following any curriculum by anybody else.
And I can imagine that indeed sometimes, well, especially if I send off people to your course and now all of a sudden they come back and they question everything I say and they are asking questions like, why did I send them to you?
Yeah, so that doesn't happen often, right? But
Okay.
no, but what doesn't happen is that people come back from courses and a lot of times they say, we were going to do X. We're not so sure we should do X anymore. We should do X prime or we should do Y. Why? Because they are now empowered to make possibly different choices. And why am I saying
that's the
that
kind of the thing that's what the kind of thing I was implying. So indeed,
Yeah,
that you were going there with an expectation and you're returning with a different expectation or with a different worldview, I would say.
yes. And so while my worldview does actually align with what the Agile community identifies as Agile, again, I don't just echo what various others say, except where it makes sense to me and where I've actually seen it work. I've worked with over 100 clients so far, so I kind of have patterns for what works and what doesn't. So what I'm saying is it's a little bit of a challenge for business because oftentimes people do have the expectation that they'll get a certain predictable thing. So for instance, early on into this, I decided not to participate in any certification scheme. I know for a fact that has cost me a lot of money. I still make a good living, but I'm sure it has cost me a lot of money because I could have filled courses all the time. But then I would be teaching things that I don't necessarily believe actually help. I mean, they help sometimes some people, but not universally enough. So I question
And you would
that.
need to repeat the same thing over and over, where now you can have your worldview evolve and everything, I would say.
Yes, and I know there are some people who've taken courses of mine twice or three times because they're now with different employers, and so that they know that some of the material has changed a bit because we know more now, right? For instance,
Exactly.
my basic courses used to include story points. They no longer do because there's plenty of evidence showing that story points are probably not going to be helpful most of the time. So instead, I have content and a simulation and stuff about what actually does help. Okay. Yeah, and actually, all three books and the one I'm writing now, they're all none of them is mainstream. They all deal with things that other people just don't deal with. I mean, nowadays they do more, but for instance, when the human side of Agile came out, hardly anybody talked about the human beings who use that process that we all love so much,
Hmm.
right? Everybody was a resource. Everybody still is a resource, but that's a different problem. uh, or even how to explain what an agile mindset is without using Scrum ideas. It's totally possible. Back in 2015, it was hardly done. So I'm always a little bit outside the norm. It it's a challenge, but at the same time, I see it as a blessing. Not because of I'm true to myself and all of that, but because there are actually lots of people in lots of organizations who do want that. They don't want to. They don't want the regurgitated.
It kind of puts you different in the market, of course, because if you would do a certain certification, why would I choose you over somebody else? I don't know,
Right?
because it might be more or less the same course, or it looks like it should be the same course. Where
Exactly.
for you, that yeah, it makes it very clear. If I go to your course, that's what makes you specific, and it's different than my course or somebody else's. That makes it very clear.
Yeah.
So once people like what you do, that message is kind of sending them back to you. Otherwise, it might be sending them back to another training that does more or less the same kind of thing. So that's indeed.
Yeah.
But I would assume that way, or what I'm hearing is that your initial sell is harder because you
It
need
is.
first to prove to people like, okay, what you're talking about is bringing value.
Yes. So that's why, for instance, I stay away from answering RFPs, right? All those requests for
mm,
proposals, because they are looking for standard stuff, just like hiring by buzzword. Um, for me to right, and I'm sure for you it's the same thing. For us to start working with the client, we need to build a relationship first. So we are
mm.
partners, not vendors, right? And definitely not resources. And
Yeah,
yes, that's
it's
harder,
you
but
need
it's
you need to
yeah,
get in the door, and you need to have that
yeah,
conversation before we can have that conversation, basically.
yeah.
Uh,
But it has definitely led to a really interesting career and overall business experience. I mean, I love it when, and that happens a lot actually, that, people call me up and say, 7 years ago, I was in your course. And sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't. They're not even the one who actually procured the course. They just attended. And now they've moved elsewhere, they got promoted. Oh, come help us here. So I know a lot of business comes through referrals. No big surprise, and of course from experiences. But I like that the message stuck. The message stuck, and people are saying, "Okay, it's not just that you happen to be the only one I know, but I actually liked what you
mm,
had to say." And I know that's not
mm.
for everyone, and that's all right.
Yeah, and the opposite is true as well. That some people might say, well, okay, that's not the person to hire because in this company that message won't sell. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then you probably don't want you or me, or yeah, that's
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
recognize that. That's definitely something that is yeah, once you and I fully agree. Yeah, there is a lot of money in the certification scheme. There's a lot of money there, and this is not bad mouthing for me on some of the people that have chosen that, because even some of the big agile names have chosen it at some point for whatever reason, and
Yeah.
that's there is nothing wrong there. And yeah, it's just like everybody's choosing their different paths, and I think for me that's also one of the things I like about the agile community, because it also means that we're so different and we all yeah give some kind of different flavor, and in the end we're all making similar kind of meals and all a little bit different, and yeah,
Yes.
sometimes you just want to have different kind of things, so that's fine as well.
Yeah. So no, this is not a knock on certification in general. I definitely don't want to get into that argument, but no, and some look, I know some really awesome trainers, and when somebody asks for a certified course and I just don't offer those, I send them to those trainers,
Exactly.
and that's totally fine. But I know that if I played that game, I would not be teaching what I think is actually helpful. So I know that there is some variation, and some trainers do this and some trainers do that, but fundamentally they're beholding beholden to what they're supposed to teach, the curriculum, in some cases, even the slides, which is like beyond me. But yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I fully agree. I understand again part of the messaging and part of, okay, if you have a brand you have to uphold the brand and whatever,
Hmm,
so
yeah.
there's definitely part of it. But like you say, it's some people are better at doing that. I really like to yeah, just having selling my own thing and creating at the
Hmm.
same time. We have to create everything, we have to invent everything. You
We do.
that's and and yeah, that's again, that is it's all different. I really like that you wanted to stress it's no attack on anything. It's just like, okay, you need to do whatever you need to do, and like you say, it's a challenge and it's a good thing at the same time. What I've noticed, and of course we know each other for a while, so I noticed that you're a very passionate person, and I notice it again here. So what drives you? Do you know where that passion is coming from?
A few years ago, I was doing a little bit of a chartering activity for my business. And as part of that, I was thinking back to, okay, so what is that personal vision? What really drives me? And the answer is two words. It is responsible humanity.
Mm.
Each of these packs a punch. So when I say responsible, this is very much informed by the teachings of Christopher Avery, who's a good friend, in terms of, we respond, we don't just cope, in terms of we do things out of choice. We make things right. And humanity, because that's who we are, and I want everybody to act that way. And what I see happening a lot around me, um, more so in the last couple decades, is that humanity in general is acting in a very irresponsible way, and that's not going to play out well for the two humans I'm raising at home. And
Mm.
so I try to make it so there's more good in the world.
So
Uh,
in a sense, you
yeah,
want to leave the world better as than you found them. Is that the kind of way that I'm hearing? Also
yeah,
for your
yes,
children?
yes. Um, but more specifically, like when we say better, how is
Hmm.
by helping. Actually, I mean, it's not like I can control anyone, but by helping more people act more responsibly. And
And
Agile is a
in
great
that
vehicle for
sense,
that.
setting an example, that's also what I'm hearing, because
Yes,
a
exactly,
lot of the
exactly.
choices that you just talked about is really about you saying, okay, I can make money, but this is actually, I feel much more that I helping more people in that way, so I'm choosing for this. So you
Yeah.
lead by example, both for your children but also for the community, and in a sense also for your clients.
Yes,
um,
and like what I think of as my overall tribe, so to speak, which is fairly large.
mm,
Um, and the humanity side of things really has to do with really treating each other as the human beings we are. And we are not perfect and we're not predictable, but we all have a right to be here, and we all try to do the best with what we have. Um,
mm. And
yeah,
do you have any idea? Because for me, one of the sub questions around what drive and that passion, you have any idea where that grew in you, where you learned that kind of way of thinking?
not sure. I mean, it's not the
And
first time I've been asked this, but I don't actually know, to be honest.
it's a hard
Um,
question, and I think
of
I
course.
sometimes ask it to many people. Well, to sometimes ask it as a second question, and I know most people like, I don't know. It's something. Yeah.
We're all a product of how we grew up, right? And
Mm,
so, how did I grow up? Well, I grew up um, in Israel in the 70s and 80s, family of Holocaust survivors, not all sides of the family. On the other side of my family, pioneering family, established one of the first settlements in the country. Uh, only child. Uh,
So there's already system
I don't
dynamics.
know.
We can see already a lot of things.
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, but
But I
it's
assume
also
also that your parents kind of moved things also in that direction.
oh, of course,
Uh,
of course.
that's
Okay, so you know what? Yeah, that actually brings up something. So my dad, he's 75 now, and for the longest time he was in the civil service. He worked for one of the ministries in the financial department. Okay, so kind of looking after their budget and money and whatnot. And he wasn't a crusader against corruption or anything like that, but he told me endless stories about how so and so kind of leaned on him to kind of cut corners, and somebody else leaned on him to just approve this and approve that, and all sorts of things that weren't legal. And he always pushed back, and he said, I'm pushing back on things that the law explicitly says that we should not be doing. Now, if they change the law, fine, but so far the law is what it is. And I think that is very, very
that
descriptive of how I am. Yeah.
that
Uh,
sets a real
yeah.
example, of course. If he
Yes.
explains to you, like, look, these are the people that kind of ask me to do things that are illegal in a
Yes.
way, and he's explaining, yeah, that's kind of shows also like, okay, I want to do the correct thing, which is following the law,
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely
Yeah.
that is something that. Yeah,
I mean,
I assume has a lot of influence on people
yeah.
and children in general.
Yeah. Oh, you're sending me back with this question. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is part discovering, and indeed, sometimes people say I didn't really think about that up front or not at that level, and it's again up to people what they want to answer and how to how deep we want to go. But I kind of feel in some of these things because for you, the way I know you, this is really true to your core. Like
Yeah.
okay, like you said, the responsible human. That's really like okay, I'm not going to just take any assignment if
Yeah.
I think it's just money, but I will hurt people,
Mhm.
resources, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of recognize that. There's a lot that you and I and a lot of us around us, a lot of us say, well, maybe you can better ask someone else. That's yeah. I think that's already some achievement, some nice way. But if you look back at other things that you've done, what do you consider yourself your biggest achievement, so or the biggest achievement so far? Because of course
Mhm.
it's not over.
Uh, are you asking about work achievements or
I,
personal
I leave
achievements?
it I leave it open to people. The default answer that most people say is oh my children in many ways, which is kind of easy and not easy because sometimes it goes deeper. But I really leave it open to what people want to look at.
Hmm.
Because that's again for me that's the kind of diversity. If I say go in that direction, then everybody
Hmm.
goes there.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Because I was going to say my children.
it's not that you can't, but
Yeah.
it's a need to do.
So I consider this an achievement, not so much in the parents are proud of their kids and whatever, and I know you are proud of yours, and like it's all good. But you know, so at work, I'm always in front of leaders at all levels, up to CEO, and they face a lot of the same challenges that we face in parenting.
Hmm.
So you always have some level of control available to you, but you don't want to, and you shouldn't use all of it or most of it or sometimes none of it. You
But
want
it's
to,
tempting sometimes.
and sometimes you have to, right?
Hmm.
So that's one. I mean, presumably rare situations. At the same time, you want to influence, you want to set examples, you want to communicate in a way that others understand you. Um, the people on the receiving end don't always act as you expect them to, especially if they're like 2 years old, right? I mean, mine
Or
are almost
20,
20
I
now.
mean.
Yeah, mine are almost 20 now, but and of course it's different, right? But
Hmm.
um, so there's that, and the other is that as parents and as leaders, one of the best things we can do is create the conditions that allow the growth and the success, right? That's again system
Hmm.
thinking. And so I see a lot of parallels between how I've acted with my kids and how I act with my clients. And and previously to that, a lot of how I acted with my clients informed how I acted with my kids.
Hmm.
So I consider them my biggest achievement because they turned out to be good people.
And that brings again back to the thing that we discussed before
Yeah,
about, okay, responsible human for you, but also
yeah,
creating children that are responsible humans. And in that sense, probably
yeah,
the leaders that you're coaching, you want, yeah, to
yeah,
become more responsible in many ways. So
yeah.
that's
So, I have twins, boy and girl, and, they're different. They're alike in some ways. They are siblings after all. Um, each has their successes, their challenges, and whatnot. But they're good people. They're good people, and they will be, and they already are, but they will be, upstanding members of society. They don't have to be captains of industry. They don't have to be first in class or anything like that. I want them to be um, happy, but happy in an authentic way, in a way that actually, makes them part of the community and not in the self-serving way. So that's really where I see an achievement, and it's work that never stops, right?
Yeah, I agree. This is why it's interesting to say when you said 2 years old or 20 years old. I mean, the challenges are completely different, and we're never prepared. Every time that we think, okay,
Of course.
this is now going to be easier for whatever reason, and something else is thrown at
Yeah,
you. Either it's Corona or it's something else.
yeah,
It's they that have friends or studies or whatever, and then again we need to think, okay, what would I want them to do, and how could I indeed create these conditions that they can do these kind of things. And I really like that the way you stressed it also about, um, I would say, the standards that you say, like you say, you want them to be happy, but not just fake happy, Instagram happy, but really like, okay,
yes,
happy. You don't want to put, okay, you don't want need to be the captain of the industry,
yeah,
that number one in school or whatever,
yeah,
but really like, okay, I want you to take responsibility, and these kind of things. That's a different kind of, I don't know, um, line that you want them to achieve, which
yeah,
is both good and bad, in the sense that we put it there. At the same time, I think is also, as a parent, or at least that's one of my challenges, that to say, okay, I don't want to put the bar too high that it's
mhm,
impossible for them to reach, but at the same time I want to, okay, is it still challenging enough that it's not boring, because that's the other part with children. You don't
mhm,
know what, so that's, yeah, that's a lot of these things is, yeah, is about parenting. It's
yeah,
and that's why I said also, that for me it was not illegal to answer children for this, because this is the kind of answer that I'm looking for. That's not just, okay, just my children, but no, you put the whole package around that, what that means for you.
yeah,
um, the question I sometimes ask when I talk about, okay, what is your biggest achievement, is that I sometimes ask, is it for people, is it easy for you to brag? And of course, bragging about, because that's a little bit about the question below. The question is, okay, can you brag? Probably bragging or being proud about your children is easier, but I still want to add that sub question: is it easy for you as a person to be proud of your successes?
it's actually really hard. Well, it's not that, the bar is high and I'm not happy with myself. No, I'm really happy with how things have turned
Mm,
out, but I try no, I try not to brag. No, um, uh, no, but at the same time, I don't brag about my kids either, because
mm,
I did not create them the way they are.
You just
Be-
created the environments, like you said earlier.
Yes,
You
I mean,
create
I
the
gave them
circumstances.
opportunities. I gave them, the feedbacks and the nudges and all of that. I gave them what they needed and not what they didn't, and all of that. But the rest is their choice.
Hmm,
And
indeed.
I'm here to help and enable and remove some impediments. That changes as the years go by. Uh, but they are their own making.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah. It's very tempting as a parent sometimes to think, oh, this is our achievement, but like you say, it's never ours. And even if it's because most of us were with two, but there's all like I don't know what country that is, but it's really it takes a whole village
Yes.
to raise children. I think it's an African proverb.
Yeah.
And I think even if we're no longer living in villages or if we're more in a global world, I still
Yeah.
think it's true. Our children are created a lot by other people around us that we don't always have influence on that.
Yeah. So to me, the yardstick or the acceptance criteria is that they make good choices, and I think they make
Mm.
good choices. Yeah.
And that's yeah, I think that's a very nice way of looking at it. It's like okay, uh, it might, and even if it might not always be the same choice that we make, but we know that okay, you looked at the options and
Yeah.
you chose that because you're happy or you think that this is good, and that's a really good yardstick to look at children.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to put that. Okay, let's move to
Move
that
on.
next question. Um, do you have a personal agility tip to share? Do you have anything that you think I want to share this to the world?
Okay. So I can think of a few. The first one, and that's actually something that my son asked me about, and he totally took straight away, and that is don't set yourself goals, set intents.
Hmm.
I think the Western world in particular is too enamored with goals, especially smart goals. It's not a bad
Hmm.
idea. They have their place in many situations, but at the same time, they can be a bit too much. They can constrain us too much. They can um, kind of blind us to other things, and so on and so forth. What I like is to set intents. Okay, so they're less about deadlines and quantities and things of that nature. And I find that that helps me relax a bit more and to and also to just keep more options open. So again,
Yeah,
we're here
I'm
because of Agile. It's like outcome, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of smart, and like you say, they have their place. But smart, I've seen so many places where smart goals really limit what people are looking for,
yeah,
and it should be, yeah, we need to be able to test it, and yeah, but sometimes we just know that something else might not be good to test, but okay, then we don't choose it. Yeah, but maybe that's a better outcome. Yeah, I get that.
hmm,
Um, and sometimes, even halfway through it, we might know, oh, wait a minute, that goal that we set, I see a better option or I see something else that is better. And oh, but if it's a smart goal, we need to obtain it and we need to do it. Well, maybe the
yeah,
world has changed. And yeah, that's definitely something that, so that's a good one. And I think you said that you had a few ideas.
yeah. So another one that I've used for the longest time is how we kind of budget things personally, like we allocate our resources, our time, attention, money, and so on. My choice, and I think that contributes to personal agility, is to spend little on material things, and that frees up more room where I don't even worry about budgeting, where I spend, which is two things. One is health, and the other is experiences.
Okay, say some more.
So, I'm 50 now, and the body's not what it used to, for better or worse, right? Of course.
Reality check.
Of course, of course. I get physiotherapy on a semi-regular basis. It costs money, right? And it takes time. I get some chiropractic sometimes. I do all sorts of other things. Like I actually invest in this without worrying too much about how much it costs because I'm playing the long game here to feel good in the present, but also make it possible for later when the deterioration arrives. Um,
And then it will cost a lot more money if you don't invest in it
and
now.
some things there's no undo for some things,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly. That
Uh,
I really like that how you put it. There's no undo on health.
yeah,
Indeed, if you do something which is not good for your body, it's not well. We can
yeah.
replace some parts of our body, but it's not. Yeah, it's not the
Uh,
ideal world. Let's put it like that.
Look, I'm fortunate enough that most of the people in my family from the previous generation are still around, and
Mm.
I can see what has undo and what doesn't. And even if there is an undo, it's partial undo. And also, it kind of changes how you think about things and what you allow yourself to do. So, for instance, I started running 9 years ago. Now I run 10K about once a week.
Wow,
And
that's not
I
bad.
used I used to hate running. Seriously, school totally turned me off this. Like gym classes at school totally turned me off this. I started running
And
for it.
wait,
Totally unrelated.
before we go
Yeah.
into the result, do you have any idea what in school turned you off to running? Because I have the
Oh,
same thing, so I wonder if there was something that
well,
if you know.
because school gave us the standard solution. The standard solution was um, like in 10th grade, every class you run this long. And every few classes you run, it was a 600-meter around the school, and we time you. And I'm like,
Mm,
I come in at the end and I'm hobbling and I'm out of breath. I was asthmatic as a kid and like I can't do this. But the gym teacher, he did what the standard showed. And
run
that's
faster, run faster.
no, but it was more about, just do it. And like,
Mm.
no, that totally didn't work for me. So there's that. Um Also, the
And
city I
so
grew up in,
what triggered
yeah.
you then to take it on 9 years
Oh,
ago?
because there was a different motivation. I started doing all sorts of adventure races, kind of like The Amazing Race on TV. And,
Mm,
to be even moderately successful, you should run, not walk. So those are not
mm,
running races. They were like you need to get places and do stuff. And I figured I'm not gonna walk. I'm gonna run. So I started running, and initially it was horrible and like seriously bad. But then I noticed that I actually like this. And, anybody who's picked up running, they know what it's like. Once they get okay with it, I'm not saying great, but just even okay. And I liked it enough. And then I did 5Ks and I went and I did races. And, I live in Toronto where it doesn't get too hot. So you can actually run in summer. Um, of course, also in the spring and fall. And I liked it enough. And then I figured, okay, I'll try longer and I'll try longer. And the races got
mm.
you know, more elaborate and whatnot. Um, so
And so now it's every week, and you
yes,
run a nice
and
distance, I would say.
yeah, and 2 years ago there was one of the races we covered 19 kilometers in 3 hours, and that was painful. But a little while afterwards, I think I herniated a disc, and I still have some leftover pain from that. And I'm doing what I can to fix it with help from others. But I want to be in shape to keep running as long
Mm,
as my body allows me, and I want it to allow longer, you know? So I invest in it now. Okay, I invest in it now to play the long game. I afford to invest in it because it's a priority. Okay, getting a fancier car is not a priority. I have a car that works, doesn't need fixing because it's a Toyota, and I love it. It does what I need it to do, and I'm not afraid that anybody would steal it. And I like, fine. I
That's
don't spend money on this. Yeah, cars don't interest me at all. Um, but
I really
experiences,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
I now have a car that is not that old, but my previous car was 20 years old, and I get a lot of the same thing that you had. That nobody's going to steal it. It works. It's fine. I don't need any fancy. And yeah, for me, it's also about the long thing. And okay,
Hmm.
now it's a fancier car, but it's an EV, which makes it again for the long run, because I think
Yeah,
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 gasol
I get that.
cars
Yeah,
in
yeah.
20 years we don't get it anymore. So that's the kind of thing I really like, how in a lot of the things that you do, you really think the long game. Like you say, my parents also had some surgeries and some other things, in the sense that it's kind of fixing the kind of things that, yeah, or yeah, that could be fixed, but like you say, not everything is fixable. And health is really, the older we get, I'm also just over 50, yeah, then I think about all these things at the same thing. So really like, how you look at the world and how you look at these kind of things. I'm
Wait,
also, I recognize what you say about the school, because the school system about running, it really like it's kind of, yeah, this is the goal, you need to run. And yeah, it never worked for me. I remember my father telling me when I was younger, said, yeah, don't worry about running too fast. It's really about, you're much more a person that can run longer. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I
mm,
understand it now. It's really not about the fastest runner for me. It's like more like, and but school wrecked me in running, because I'm still not able for myself to set my own pace, because I just can't. I've learned to, when I run, to just go too fast, or either too slow or too fast, but I can't run the. And so for me,
yeah.
if I can run with a person that can run at a speed that is adapted to me, I can run for a very long time, but not on my own, because I have school wrecked me on that. And that's, I
Well,
recognize a lot of these things.
maybe technology can help you because there are apps for setting pace, right? And you can listen to music that's at a certain pace, right? You can do all of that. Um, but you know what? This is.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing. I'm running with headphones
Mhm.
to have a certain, what is it, BPM, and that kind of helps
Yeah.
me indeed to do that
You
kind
know,
of
this
stuff.
brings up actually another personal agility tip, and that is to actually look for different ways of achieving something that maybe we haven't been able to achieve.
Mm.
So, if running is a problem the way you describe it, what other things can help you? Running with a person, running with using technology. So, for instance, I do run long distances, but I can't actually run them entirely. I do walk every now and then. So I have an app that plays sounds for at intervals. So there's a
Mm.
running interval and a walking interval. Super simple app. That helps me cover greater distances than I could otherwise. Um,
And it kind of tells you at some point, like, okay, now it's better to take a little break and to start walking again. And then after a minute or two, it beeps again
yeah,
and says, okay, now you can. Yeah, that's a smart
yeah.
thing to do.
Like I set it up front so I don't have to deal with it while I run, and it's like I don't know, 100 seconds run and 40-second walk, something like that. No, but I want to give another example. Um, so, like I said, I'm 50. Um, you know how men over 40 start putting on weight. The world doesn't seem to know how to deal with the whole intent of losing weight. And
Mm.
it's a whole industry that's not, let's say, not great.
Mm.
And somehow I found this mm, weight loss program that works totally differently from what typical diets work, how they work. And I've been on it now, and it's like a miracle. And you know how in Agile we always say, work to outcomes. Well, all the diets work to the same outcome, right? Lose weight. But the way they approach it is no good. They say, well, eat less and exercise more. That doesn't actually help that much. Or starve yourself, or eat just this. And none of that is sustainable. And this view,
Exactly.
when I
It's not
found,
in the
yeah,
long run. It's
it
lose
totally,
weight very
yeah.
quickly, and then you're, yeah.
And it's all, carrots and sticks. And like, you know, how are you going to motivate yourself to do something, this fundamental by punishing yourself? Really? So this one works totally differently and amazing success rates. And it's just, to me, it's really an example of how you can find a totally different way to achieve the same outcome. Now, it's not something I would have found myself. I mean, you do need a specialist, and the lady who runs it, she knows what she's doing. Um, but
That's a
yeah,
tip in its own. Eh? I mean,
yeah,
when you want to achieve, look for coaches, look for people who are experts, and use them, because we can't know everything.
yeah,
It's very tempting, and I would say, especially in our industry, in the IT industry, a lot of people think that, oh, I can fix everything, and I just need to read a book, and then it works. Nah, you probably want to have some help from people. That's a tip on its own. But
right.
sorry, I interrupted
But
you.
different people would help you different ways,
Mm.
right? So some people would tell you do X, Y, Z. Other people would only do coaching with you, even if you could actually use some straight up advice, right? Um, I like to kind of operate in the middle, depending on the situation. And but the thing is also that in order to achieve that outcome, there could be totally different paths. So,
Mm.
for instance, every diet I've ever seen, and I've only done a couple in my life, but I've seen, in my family and so on, it's always about limiting this, limiting that. This particular one, the first 4 weeks, you practically eat whatever you want to satisfaction. Now, it's not quite eat what you want. There's a food plan, but it's super generic, super generic. And just by doing that, I lost 4 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm like, okay, totally different solution to the same problem. So I'm not here to sell weight loss. We're not going to put the link in the show notes. If anybody is curious, you can connect with me privately because this is literally a miracle. But it so reinforces the notion that there's more than one way to approach a problem, and some ways work a lot better than others. And some of
Mm.
those others are the accepted wisdom quotes, right?
Mm. And yeah, it's again like the long run, and what I feel with some of these other methods, it's like their long run is to keep you going, buying other kind of methods, and it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's the long run for your business, but that's not the long
yeah, I
run for
know.
me as a client. That's the
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
So that's definitely. So thank you already for multiple kind of tips. And like you say, we for this last one, we might not put the link in it. The link for the app might be interesting for the running, but we'll talk
There's
about that
plenty of those.
later.
Plenty of those. I mean,
Yes,
really.
that's
I mean,
indeed.
any developer could write one like this in a day. It's like super trivial.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Sometimes we don't need the fancy things.
Yeah,
That's a tip on its own as well.
it's a timer.
Uh,
It's a timer with two sounds. I mean, really.
Mm, that's maybe is just what we need. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move to that next question about remote work. And I think you have been doing remote work before COVID, if
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Plenty. Yeah.
So I assume that you have lots of experience and a lot of things. So what's something that you want to share with the world?
So look, the type of work I do is probably very different from what a lot of the viewers do. So,
Mm,
coaching, consulting, training, that's kind of an in and out type of thing. I don't work like with a team of peers. I work with a team of the client or with leaders of the client. So providing this type of services remotely is a little different. Um, I've learned that a lot of what I think makes for really good, successful delivery of services can totally be delivered online. A
mm,
little bit differently than in person, of course, but I know, and it's been 2.5 years now. Um, like delivering courses, it's the same quality. Now, there's some things that can't happen as much, like, people sitting together in a room and kind of chatting as opposed to just, breakouts and, Zoom chat or whatnot. I know that. But there are other benefits as well that sometimes balance out. Um, in
Thanks
terms
for
of,
sharing that already,
yeah,
because indeed sometimes people say it's yeah. I see a lot of people like it's either black or white. It's completely better or completely worse. And no, there's
no, it's more
like everything.
complicated.
There's
Yeah,
exactly. There's,
yeah. I mean, here's one thing. The fact that online we all see each other at the same distance, as
mm,
opposed to you're sitting at the far end of a table and I can barely make out your facial expression because my eyesight is just not as good as it used to be. And I mostly chat with the two people near me. That doesn't happen online. Online, we have other things going on, but we're all at the same distance. We can read facial expressions much easier. So that's one thing. Uh,
that's an interesting way to point
uh,
out, because not many people think about that. Uh,
if they have their
that's
cameras on.
okay. That brings again another kind of discussion
I
that
know,
we
I know.
sometimes have. But it's thanks for sharing that, because indeed sometimes people don't think enough about that kind of thing.
Yeah. Something else that's going on, using the chat while there's stuff going on in the Zoom,
Hmm.
to me, that actually has some benefits. Sometimes it's a total distraction and we don't want it. Other times, the fact that there are two parallel communications happening on kind of different things at the same time, it actually mirrors how we act these days.
Mm,
So
that's yeah.
you know how sometimes you talk with people and they do have their phone in their hands and they're looking something up as you talk and they say, oh, blah blah blah, based on what they saw online. It already enriches the conversation, which is different from we're in a room and if we're polite, only one person speaks at a time. Everybody else kind of keeps to themselves. So again, pros and cons. It is not black and white. Nowadays, whenever a client wants something delivered, I put forth the option. They mostly want online because they've already hired people elsewhere, so they're not going to
Mm,
be there at the same time, except in rare occasions. Um, yeah, but when it comes to remote work for like teams and multiple teams and like, our clients, right? I think the move to remote working and hybrid and all of that, I think it's created a rift that will never heal. I see lots of benefits in working from home and hybrid and this and that, but I think it's created a rift, a cultural rift, a serious tipping in the market that will just never heal. And I think will systems converge on some stable state. I think the stable state will converge on will not be healthy for anyone.
mm, that's it's also kind of, yeah, I don't know, depressing is maybe the wrong word, maybe too strong, but it's not, yeah, yeah.
I'm not happy to say that, right?
Yeah, that exactly. That's mhm.
Again,
um
lots of benefits. And the other thing is this, it's happened, right? So COVID happened. Everybody got the chance to work from home. Everybody got a taste, a long enough taste that we know um, that tipped the system. Okay.
mm,
Even before we had people occasionally working from home, we had collaboration tools. All of this was present before, but not to this extent, uh, and not with the effects this one has had.
right. That's and like you say, it was a long time. Everybody was forced to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's um, when yeah, I see a lot of people now or companies thinking, yeah, we need forced people coming back, but yeah, like you say, it's the system has tipped. So there's some people like to do it, some others don't like it. It doesn't really matter. It's really like the system has tipped, it has changed, and now we need to look where, yeah, what are the advantages, but it's not always that easy.
Mhm.
So if I want to deal with that, so you have a tip that could help in one way or another?
So there are several things I can say, but um, the situation is still very much in flux.
Mm,
And the other thing that's happening is that, we can give tips and our viewers will want tips, but none of us actually get to have enough of a say in what's going to happen. So, for instance, maybe you're an engineering manager and you're saying, well, in my team, I would love to have this type of hybrids, 3 days a week in the office, whatever. But your CEO says otherwise, or your HR says otherwise, or um, all your measurements and metrics and appraisals and performance this and that are going to work against you. And there's actually not a whole lot you can do.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, so if anybody is going with totally on site or totally remote or hybrid, there's different advice that can help with this and that. Uh, but in terms of coming up with like an ideal solution, eh, the jury is still out on that one. And I think it gets decided at way higher level than anyone who's part of this.
mm, yeah. So, well, but when I was asking for a tip, I was not always looking for a solution. But is there any way that we can, that you think, okay, this might help out for dealing with it, or this might be a good experiment to do,
Ah,
or something to watch out? Is there anything that you
yeah,
you
yeah.
have
So
there?
yeah, I think something that this whole situation has caused is a pronounced reduction in teamwork and in the openness to teamwork because more individuals are prioritizing what they get out of this, like the flexibility at home and all of that, which
Mm,
is super important. But I think organizations, for the most part, have not had great teamwork to begin with. They use the word team, but those are work groups, right? Um, in many cases. So pay extra attention to, is your team actually being a team? Not just showing up to the same sprint activities or whatnot, not just officially reporting into the same person, but are they actually acting as a team? And
mm.
I would suggest that in many situations, there is a lot to do there that actually has nothing to do with remote or not remote, but remote makes it worse.
I really like that phrase. Remote works is work. Basically, everything you have is amplified remote, and if things are not good, then a lot of that is amplified, and then you need to look for ways to make that better. Um, and
Yeah,
and
but
the fact that people are a team or not a team, yeah, that just, like you say, it's way worse when you, yeah,
yeah.
when you're not a team.
So I want to add something to this. A lot of people have made the case that when we are together in person, there's more serendipity, room for innovation, ideas build on each other. All true. What people don't normally talk about is when we're together, we can help each other when the other person is in trouble. So I'm
Hmm.
sitting next to you in the office and I can see that you're having an awful day. Or I
Right.
can see that, you've pulled a task from the board and you're working on it, but you're kind of lost. Or I sit next to you and, I'm working and you're working and half an hour in, you're like, oh, because
Yeah.
something broke, because you just discovered that something you did an hour ago broke something, whatever. Developers know what I'm talking about. I can hear this and say, hey, do you need me to take a look?
Or
If
do
you're
you need
working,
to take a break? Let's take a break. Let's go have
whatever it is,
coffee, whatever. Yeah, that's, yeah,
whatever it
indeed.
is, you're now not just within your own cocoon, and somebody else, me in this case, has noticed that there is a situation here. And maybe
Mhm.
what you need is to vent, maybe you need to curse, maybe you need help, maybe you need water. I don't know what it is, but I can possibly help out with this. But if you're at home and this thing happened, what would you do instead? You would try to fix the thing, try harder, work overtime, do all sorts of things on your own, which may help sometimes and sometimes they won't.
Mm. And that's indeed for me, again, people that are really good, the problems become worse if people are really good at asking for help. Then that's probably not bad if you're remote, because then we'll just reach out and say,
Hmm.
okay, Eve, Gil, whoever,
Yeah,
Zulma, please help me out. But if I'm really bad at asking for help remote, okay, I'm stuck, because I really want to solve it myself, because I'm in IT, I'm an engineer, and I should be smart and I should find it. Yeah,
and
that's
not only that, your leadership, your team lead, tech lead, manager, whoever, they're not going to know. They're not going to be able to help you. They have a hard enough time managing everything going on and trying to make sure that they actually have a team
mm,
that
well, like you
the
said,
obvious
not
pitfall.
really a team. Yeah.
I know, no, but the obvious thing then is to just kind of manage people individually. So you would feel a little bit more stressed and a little bit more unsafe in terms of getting your task done.
Yeah.
So I know one of your questions is about which book you read. So I've been reading this one, and this one,
And that's exactly the question I want
yeah,
to move to. So let's
no, but
move to the
there's an
question.
example. This one is an example. So they make some really good points in this book. They give some really good advice. Um, if anybody's listening, not watching, the book is Rework by Jason Fried and David Heimeyer Hansen, so DHH. Um, he also posts a lot about how the company runs. And
Mm,
what I'm reading between the lines is that there's actually not a whole lot of teamwork there. This is a company that's been remote first since the beginning, which was like 20 years ago. And people either work alone or in pairs, not in bigger teams. That's what I'm getting from
mm,
the book. I could be wrong. Also, what I'm getting from his posts, and that's the mode that they've had for the longest time. They're set up to handle it. It's not accidental. Everything they do is super intentional, which is terrific. Um, but I think it also goes to show that in some situations, being remote and being on your own, not great. You're missing
I
out on some
really
things.
like the fact that you're stressing out that a lot of what's in that book is about, yeah, optimizing the work for people all on their own, not really working as a team.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit the feeling I have with many of the remote, or the books about remote work, is they okay, a lot of it is optimizing that situation, but we haven't, or I haven't seen many books that stress out how could you build a team remote and how you could we make it work. I mean, there are people working already doing ensembling remote and
Hmm.
everything,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's limited. Well, ensembling itself is already limited in physical work as well, but it's more in physical world than in the remote world, I would say. But yeah, that is. I agree. That's probably the challenge for the next few years. Like, how could we really go back to what it is to being a team? And in that sense, it's kind of back to what we were before we had agile, because then a lot of companies were also kind of managing, like you said, resources, and okay, let's have it.
Yeah.
And the agile world has focused a lot on how could we work it as a team, and it's one of the challenges. How could we make sure that we again act as a team? It's really good observation there.
Yeah. I mean,
And
if
so,
we
but
believe if we believe that we're more successful as a team, then we need to make it possible. We need to put in the
Mm,
conditions that enable actual teamwork, and not just say, hey, you guys are in a team because we refer to you as a Scrum team, and because maybe you have a Scrum Master or something, that makes you a team. No, it doesn't.
mhm. No, it's like you said, it's more a work group, and it's not because we say to people that you're a team that you're a team.
Yeah,
My father used to say, I think it's not because you call a cat a dog that it okay, that doesn't change the behavior of the animal.
no.
so so that's the same kind of thing. But I we kind of going to well, it's not the full negative side of the book, but let's also look at the why did you choose the book? Because I assume that there is a lot of things that you like about the book as well. Could you say something specific about what you like about that book?
Yeah, so their intent in writing this book is to kind of poke holes in accepted wisdom, which, as you've heard from me, I like to do.
Hmm.
They describe a way of working and all sorts of premises and tenets and beliefs that are very much in line with Agile, although not officially based on, the Agile mindset, but
Hmm.
very much aligned with the Agile mindset. Um, and I like that they explain that some things that are taken for granted can actually be harmful. So,
Mm.
for instance, they say, don't obsess over growth, right? Part of the issues we have in the world today is, the growth has stalled, which makes me
Mm.
wonder, so what? Yes, you need enough growth to compensate for the growth in population and for growth in needs, but do you need to grow more than that? Why? I mean,
Mm.
that is a reinforcing loop that will end badly.
And in that sense, their company is a nice example because they're not
Yes,
always looking for okay, we want to
no,
yeah, that's really is indeed
yeah.
something that
Um,
is
I like how they say that good enough is fine, and we've seen this in their product. Uh, yeah, things like that.
fine. Yeah, and I yeah I think I read their book um, before the pandemic. I'm not sure because there's multiple books, and I'm not sure which one I read at what moment.
This is one of the
Uh,
older ones, I think.
yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's like you say, it's they they have a specific way of running their company, a specific way that is, like you say, is not always running it like the rest of the world, and they don't care. I don't always agree with some of the other worldviews that they have,
Yeah, me too.
but again, this is why I like. I don't need to agree with everything that a person says. Same thing with a book. There might be lots of ideas in a book that I don't like, but if I can pick up one or two ideas that I really love, that's fine for
Hmm.
me as well. And
Yeah,
definitely, that's a kind of book where there's multiple things there that kind of also shook my ground when I read it. It's like, okay, not every well, okay, why is it, and like you say, they're kind of agile, but they're kind of not agile because they sometimes try to poke holes on some of these ideas, and I think that's good as well. Agile should never be, and it's a little bit sometimes too much a religion.
hmm,
I don't like religion in the sense that everybody should do that. I think we both agree on that part for other religions
yeah.
as well. That's the kind of thing that their book really does. So that is indeed a nice way of putting
You
it.
know how I define agile, like big A agile, is any way of working that is congruent with the spirit of the manifesto.
The, the interesting part is I agree there, but I call that little a agile in the sense that for me, big A agile means the branding. But other than that, and I think most
Okay.
people agree with you. I think most people want to have that capitalized, but for me, a capital makes me always think about branding. Other than that, I fully agree on the feeling that you have there.
Yeah,
And
no,
yeah,
the branding I would identify as Scrum, Safe, Less, all of those, right?
Hmm.
Whereas it's big A agile because it's a thing, it's a noun, well, adjective in this case, but it's a thing. And so what would I identify it as? Well, presumably what the Agile community is kind of based on, which is the Agile Manifesto. And um, and when I mean when I talk about that, I mean as long as what you have is congruent with the spirit, which is why we can also do it outside of software without talking about architectures emerge from self-organizing teams, which is not the case in HR and marketing, right? So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, for me, yeah, definitely, I agree there. That's that's a good thing. Um, yeah. Um, Yeah, and again, of course, the discussion about big A or lower A is not really that important. I think
yeah, no,
the more important thing is, do we agree on how we look at these kind of things? And I
yeah,
think a lot, and like you say, it's not so much about the branding of these certain frameworks and other things about Agile,
hmm,
which in its sense, I kind of like that we have multiple kind of brandings because they all have different kind of flavors, and it kind of shows that, okay, for different kind of people we need different kind of things, and probably what you do is somewhere a mix of all of these or none of these, depending on what could
yeah,
work in your company one way or another. And like you say, then we can use it outside of IT.
yeah.
Okay, I want to move to, well, for me, one of the most interesting questions, and especially after this conversation, but also knowing you, I'm really curious about how you, what question do you think I should also ask you, and what's that answer?
So I think the question is, what's one mistake, one big mistake that people keep doing at work?
Hmm, wow, that's a really interesting question.
You want to try answering that before I do?
No, you took me off surprise there. I'm
I
really
know, I
interested.
know.
If after you give your answer, I might be giving something. I might be thinking, but I first want to hear yours.
Okay,
Uh,
so I sort of alluded to this earlier, and the answer I would give is not appreciating that they work in a system.
hmm,
So when you look at how most organizations are run, including those that have presumably gone agile, um, a lot of decisions reflect the org chart. A lot of decisions reflect the specific structure. There's Conway's law, of course, and so on. But people make decisions um, sort of thinking locally without considering the potential effect system wide.
system wide, yeah.
Uh, so this is something that has bothered me for the longest time. Agile, uppercase, lowercase, tries to address this by saying we all work together, we make decisions based on the benefit of the customer, right? And secondarily, the benefit of our business. Um, we are all sort of team members and whatnot. So, generally speaking, in Agile, there is um, recognition that we're dealing with a system. However, if you look at how organizations actually run, it still doesn't quite happen.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if you think of a resolution of a single team, we often do act as if it's a system. If you think of the resolution of the entire company, barely at all. OKR has attempted to solve that, right? What I've been looking at recently, and that's really the subject of the next book that's coming out, is the system of product development, which is
Hmm.
really the space where Agile plays. More generically, I think of it as a value delivery system. So, for instance, if you're in a product company, that's your product managers, your designers, architects, DevOps, documentation, content, and so on. If you're in IT, that's all the people you work with normally, plus your business partners. Maybe you have a vendor. All of these people, they engage, they interact. Choices here affect something there. all the time, and we should make choices in a way that reflects that and respects that.
I like it. For me, it reminds me also a little bit about what Toyota did with their suppliers and everything, like sometimes bringing suppliers rather close,
Mhm.
almost in the same factory, because indeed they wanted to have, well, more control on the system or whatever you look at it,
Yeah.
and that, and again, there could be things wrong in that, but it's really thinking more system wise. That's really an important thing. And it's yeah, I like that, and it's indeed sometimes it is hard to think system wide at multiple things, because like every time you create a system, of course it's easier to create a few bubbles because the system is bigger, and we might have thought about the full system, and then all of a sudden we see, oh, we live in a world and there is a pandemic, so the system is again bigger, and then there's might be governance taking decisions that influence our system of the company, and we didn't think about it, and all. Yeah, it's
So what I would like people to do is not to even attempt to think of the overall system of everything, because that is not even practical,
mm,
but at least think about their system of value delivery. These are the people who watch this, right? So they are in the business of turning ideas into deliveries. And along the way, there's multiple people with multiple specialties and maybe multiple teams and some rework and this and that. When we make choices within this construct, they have effects. So sometimes what we need to do is we need to understand why we have the problems we have, right? So maybe we do 5 whys. That's no stranger, right, to a lot of people. Okay. Other times, all we need to do is think, well, what could happen as a result of it? Okay.
that's I really like that, because it's and it also puts thank you for stressing also to not look at the full picture, because it's impossible, and it reminds me also a little bit about theory of constraints. Okay, look at what's your current bottleneck, what's your current problem
Yeah.
in the system. Let's focus on that, and then
Mhm.
okay, then later on you'll find another bottleneck, another problem. Okay, then we'll focus on that, but let's not look at everything at the same time. But for me, and that kind of brings me to the kind of answer that I wanted to give, is that we should not always try to avoid everything. And for me, the biggest problem that I could see is people trying to avoid having problems and trying to avoid, yeah, having failures, because for me the biggest failure might be to yeah, because the easiest way to not have failures is to do nothing, but of course that's a bigger failure as well. I think and I've seen that before. We talked about raising children. There is no way you can raise a child, for example, if you want them to learn how to walk. Well, there is only one way to learn how to walk, that's by falling. They will trip and they will
Yeah.
fall, and it's just impossible, and you cannot avoid that. Either you keep carrying them for the rest of their life, but that's not possible, so at some point they will need to learn how to walk. And that's a little bit the same thing with everything in business. Let's minimize the problems, but let's not try to avoid all kind of things. I prefer that you make a choice, and that I don't remember who said it, but it was about, okay, let's I think it's GB Reinsberger who said, let's make sure that whatever decision we take, that it's a reversible decision, that it's not
Mhm.
that bad, that whatever decision, it's much better that we can revert it than that we take the best decision, because we know half of the decisions will be wrong. So if
Yeah.
most of our decisions are reversible, then we can continue, and that comes a little bit back to what you stated earlier on about choices in life, and about, okay, that some of the things are, you're broken if your body is so make decisions that at least help make it possible to revert and to be healthier in one way or another. It's
Yeah. I mean, if we want to look at an example of thinking systemically, anytime you're in engineering and making a decision about doing something for the product, how is this going to affect your customers? How is it going to affect customer service? If you're
Mm,
in product and you make certain choices and you never even talk to engineering, you just put stories in a queue, maybe implementing those stories is going to create liabilities. Even with the best design and coding, it will create liabilities that will make everything harder later on. Okay?
right.
So maybe product should talk to engineering, not rocket science. But the idea is not to think just about your personal or team accountabilities, but thinking about the system itself and the effects within it. Um, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's already hard enough, and that's a really interesting question, and maybe even more interesting answer. So thank you for doing that. That's yeah, a really good question. So
Mhm,
yeah, and I hope it will make people think even more about their kind of answers, because it's a good question on its own.
mhm.
Okay, let's move to that last question. Who do you think I should ask next? Who do you want me to invite?
So the person I have in mind is David Frank. He is a
And I
coach
think
in
that's
Rubin.
David. Is that
Let's
correct?
see. Yes.
Let's bring you back.
So I've known him for some time. He's a super thoughtful guy, very smart coach, works a lot with leaders. And uh, I was particularly, um, oh, okay. So one particular reason he came to mind is that 2 months ago, I asked him to review my manuscript and give feedback. And his feedback was so deep and so um, thoughtful that it took me a couple of weeks just to make my rewrites to deal with what he said. Um, so I think you'll have a very interesting conversation with
Sounds like it, because
him.
indeed, if he can make you think again about some of the things that you wrote, especially because it's not your first book, so you're already in the habit of
Yeah,
writing and learn and thinking, and then having a person reviewing and basically, well, what I'm hearing, maybe not completely right, but still making you think. That sounds like a great person to talk to as well. So
yeah.
thank you.
I told him afterward that he should kind of moonlight as um, as a developmental editor to people in our community who write books. So if anybody is
Uh,
watching this who thinks to have a book and wants some feedback that will set you straight, talk to David. Pay him. It will be worth it. I don't.
That
Okay, I'm creating a job for him that I don't know if he wants, but still,
well, it's up to him to decide.
I know. Yeah.
Uh, but I think I hope he will like it anyway. Okay, it's been a really wonderful time that we spent together, as usual, I would say. If people want to reach out to you, and you said already before that they could reach out to you for some of the more specific kind of things, what's a good way to find you?
So they can just reach out through LinkedIn. Okay,
I
I
think that's indeed. I think that's the link. I'm not sure if you can
yes,
fully
it
see
is.
it. Yes.
Yes, yes. Well, there's only one person with this name, so it should be okay. Uh, uh, Alternatively, through my website. So it's a website for a corporation, but it's me, right? So any contact through the website goes to me.
Mm.
Um, I do ask that when people reach out through LinkedIn that they put in a little note because I get so many spam connections. So a note that says that you watched me here would be helpful. And yeah, I answer everybody.
It's yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, because sometimes I think all of us we've seen it already. What's happening here? Um, we we we've seen that LinkedIn people just ask for, yeah, some kind of link, and yeah, the first few years that kind of worked on LinkedIn, but the last 2 years it's really like, yeah, there is a lot of spamming going on. That is
Well,
not always
there is
good.
actually a caveat to that. When you connect with somebody through the website,
Mhm.
putting in a note is kind of obvious, but when you connect with people through the app, there isn't.
Well, it kind of moves around from time to time. That's what
Oh,
I've noticed. So
okay.
I'm like, yeah, it's kind of very annoying that you think, or at least for me, that's how it works. I think, oh, I still have an option to put a note, and then, oh, it's sent. Okay, now I should try.
Yeah,
And depending on if you have a paid account, then you can still add a note or not, and it's really annoying.
yeah.
And I even
So
had
through the
something
website.
similar on the website. Yeah. And just because you talked about your company, I think this is the website from your company. Is this correct?
Yes, yes.
3Pay Vantage. So that might be if people want to, because you talked about your company, but if people don't know it, it might be good. And anyway, I will put
Sure.
these links into the show notes as well.
Okay.
And if people who are interested in your books, I think they can find links to the current three of your books on your website as well, I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and have more information about either the agile mindset, the human side of agile, or agile for non-software teams. And then
Hmm.
I assume that the upcoming book will be there as well.
Has to be.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your time. It was,
My
like I
pleasure.
said, it was lovely, and we'll definitely run into each other in the near future again. I'm sure.
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for
Thank
watching
you.
Who's Agile, where the stories of Agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other Agilists.